Ms. Holguin, you represented Blanca Solis today in immigration hearing that led to her case being administratively closed. How did that happen at the last minute?
Well, I believe a lot of it had to do with the public advocacy efforts that were taken up on her behalf. I'm hopeful that that's what led to the administrative closure of her case. Of course, we have no way of knowing for sure. The government informed us this morning that they would be agreeing to close her case, but didn't give us any specific reasons why.
And so earlier, was it this year or late last year, Obama kind of had directed the immigration courts to start letting people with low priority have their cases adjudicated this way.
So it wasn't actually a directive to the immigration court. It actually went to the Office of the Chief Counsel, who is the government's attorney basically in these removal proceedings. And so their office was instructed to look at cases and determine if cases were high priority cases or low enforcement priority cases. And in cases where they were low priority enforcement cases, to look at this option of administratively closing the cases as a way to save on resources, very limited resources that the government has, and that way only to focus on the high enforcement priority cases.
So someone that gets pulled over by a Doñana County Sheriff's officer, deputy rather, for failure to use a turn signal would be low priority?
Well, what the criteria for low priority cases are lack of criminal history, that the person isn't a fugitive from the immigration services or does not have many immigration violations, that they're not a threat to the community or to national security. So that's why individuals like Blanca, who have no criminal history, who have no negative immigration history other than her initial entry into the U.S., she has 2 small U.S. citizen children. She has a stable place to live. She's not a threat to the community. She's not a flight risk. People like her really are the types of cases that should be considered for prosecutorial discretion and for administrative closure.
How much weight does the court and the U.S. government give to the fact that she has 2 U.S.-born citizens or children living here?
Well, family ties is always something that's looked at by the government when they're making these types of decisions. It's not necessarily dispositive. So it's not to say that if she didn't have U.S. citizen children that her case wouldn't have been closed. I've had other similar cases closed where the individual didn't have U.S. citizen children. But really it's looking at the whole picture, looking at the person, at their involvement in the community, at their lack of criminal history, and basically ultimately deciding whether or not the person did fit within the low priority criteria. So it's not absolutely necessary that someone have U.S. citizen children in order to have their case closed like Blanca did, but certainly I'm sure that that's something that was considered in her particular case.
So what do you mean by involvement in the community? Does that mean, having a job, having the kids in school, and going to church? I noticed there were quite a few religious leaders and nuns here as well.
Well, each case is looked at differently, but I'm sure all of those things play a part in the government's decision to administratively close a case. I think if they see that a person does have a lot of involvement in their community, maybe is very involved with their church or their children's school, or they volunteer. I mean, these are all positive equities that the government will look at and consider when making these types of determinations.
Were you pretty positive today that, after 300 or so phone calls from cafe members and groups from her church, that she was going to get this kind of outcome?
Well, we can never be positive, unfortunately. We can never be positive as to the outcome in any particular case. But because of the specific facts in Blanca's case, I felt that she was a very good candidate for prosecutorial discretion and having her case closed. And I'm glad that certainly turned out to be the outcome.
So you're in immigration court, all week. And have you been watching the reform debate in Washington? And summarize your opinions of where it's at and your hopes of where it will go.
Well, I think we still have a long way to go. So thankfully, we have a proposal that's out of the Senate now, but I think we face a bigger obstacle with the House, where there are many more representatives who are opposed to any kind of immigration reform. But I think what's important is that they learn these stories, they hear stories like Blanca's. I think, unfortunately, a lot of it is based on preconceived ideas or notions of what immigration reform would mean. But I think looking at specific cases, giving these cases a face, like we were able to do with Blanca, I think that that would have a positive impact on the debate over immigration reform, and I think that more of that has to be done. A lot of times, the positive of immigration is drowned out by the negative comments on immigration.
When you both were walking out of the court today, you were smiling pretty broadly. Did Blanca say anything to you that kind of expressed her relief for the day?
Yes, I had spoken to her earlier in the day when I gave her the good news when I found out that the government had agreed to close her case, and she was very appreciative and thankful. But I think more than anything, just overwhelmed that she wasn't going to have to be afraid of being separated from her children anymore. I know I can't begin to imagine what that would feel like, and I think that that was where the overwhelming just sense of happiness came from, to know that she didn't have to face that anymore.